Alrighty. We are back. So happy to be back with you all. How was track A and track B? Did we learn a lot about blockchains? Did we learn a lot about NFTs? And I think our other track that we had was around legalities, right? Legal discussions on IP. Interesting story. Just a kind of quick note. So important to really begin to think about trademarks and copyrights in ways that you haven't, and think strategically about who you begin to partner with in those spaces. As one who's actually had to go against the ACT prep test, like the ACT test, SAT test that most people take to go into college, because our name is Act House. It's so vitally important to have lawyers who can get the job done and make it happen. I'm happy to say that we were able to make it happen and continue to operate with our name, even though there was some close relation there, but there's multiple layers and levels to this. Highly important. It's been a pleasure being with you all today. As any great CEO that has been doing the work and the efforts, there's a time for learning and there's a time for earning. And I got to get back to the earning. And so I'm going to have Abi Odun come back on stage with me. And he's going to go ahead and be our host for the rest of the session, rest of the time. But it's been a pleasure. So excited about the work that Black Man Talk Tech is doing and all the work that everybody is doing out there. Continue to flourish, be on the unicorn ambition. And I'll talk to you guys later. Abi Odun, it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you, Dominique, for being so gracious and helping us host today. We really enjoyed your time and your energy. So
thanks, man.
Hope we're catching up. Thank you, everybody. My name is Abi Odun Johnson. Good to see you all again. Hope you guys are enjoying the amazing content, amazing speakers, the connections that you're making in the comments section. Really like to enjoy seeing the community grow stronger and people getting to meet each other. We got some upcoming lessons that are going to be great. At 3 p.m. we have mental wellness, entrepreneurship, and keeping the sound mind with Kevin Dedner. And then at 3:30 we have a fireside chat with Katino Mobley. Don't know if we have any basketball fans here in the audience, but great ex-NBA player. I'm going to be talking to Evan Leaphart about off-court game. So stay right here in the main stage. I'm going to bring up Boris, who's going to kick it off with Kevin Dedner. All right, Boris, take it off.
Man, I am multitasking today. Could you hear me? Could everyone hear me? Thumbs up. Yeah. Hey, everybody, where you guys? Yes, thank you, Georgie. Where you guys dialing in from? Any cities? Can we put some cities in the chat? Can I see some cities here? You are in for a treat of a conversation today. I met a very special man several months ago. We're going to get into that conversation. I don't want to let the cat out the bag too early. But he deals in the business of mental wellness and the business of people. And I have the pleasure of introducing one of my new friends, Kevin Dedner, the founder of formerly Henry Health, the company now called Hurdel. What's going on, Brother Dedner?
Boris, how are you?
I am doing great. It's been so busy. I didn't even have a chance to say hello to you.
Yeah, man, it's a busy time, and I'm sure everybody's watching is equally as busy as well. But it's good to be here with you and pause and reflect a little on Black men in tech.
Oh wow! I see some interesting people here in the room. Joseph Peterson, or as Patterson in Miami, Sierra in Dallas, Derek Miles, Miami Beach. I love it. We got Tiffany Malier, Tamisha Avery. Awesome. So Kevin, let's hop into our conversation a little bit. But tell me a little bit about where you are, how you feeling today, and how you doing.
You know, I started the morning out. I'm sure it's because life happens. I started the morning out, and my son says to me, "Dad, your headlight is out." So what I thought was going to be a 20-minute job ended up turning into a 2-3 hour job, and just threw my day all off. And really sort of got me uncentered. And then I realized I needed to get myself back together for this afternoon, for being with you and doing some more things. And I realized how quickly we can lose our footing over the very smallest of things that we can come back to at any given point. So in spite of that, Boris, I still feel joyful.
Well, that's great. I'm encouraged. Do you recall how we met?
We were in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma for the centennial commemoration of the race massacre.
Absolutely.
And I think we were closing up some event where everyone was walking back to the hotels. I stopped with the group of friends, guys I know from Princeton, in a donut shop. And you came into that late night donut shop too. We're like, hey man, what's going on?
And me at a donut shop with complete strangers, like at midnight, right?
At midnight. Oh man, that was something else. And man, we were just reflecting on the psychology of you know, some of the black people in town in Tulsa, given what happened, and even some of the white people in town that have been there for generations, and you know what they're walking into the world with their burdens. And when we were talking about some of our brothers, we were like, man, you know, people have been riding our backs for a long time. And you start talking about what you do, and I was just amazed ever since meeting you. Tell us a little bit about Kevin Dedner and the company you founded, Hurdel.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say, I think meeting you that night at that donut shop with the other brothers was a pretty special moment. You know, Tulsa for me was this reflective pilgrimage. In fact, Boris, you know this, but I even brought my 15-year-old son there with me because I wanted to be there in Tulsa, and I wanted to, you know, feel the energy and sort of, you know, remember the ancestors there, and sort of remember this idea of Black excellence, as people often say now. This is not a new idea, so I just want to acknowledge how important I thought that Tulsa was. I even think that Tulsa is, even for all Black entrepreneurs. Like, Tulsa is a really significant place that we ought to, you know, reflect on and think about a lot. But, you know, to the point, I lead a mental health startup. The name of our company is Hurdel, and we are the leading culturally intentional teletherapy provider. But I think it's worth noting, particularly with the audience that we're with today, when we started our company, we started under the banner of Henry Health. And we started super laser focused on serving the mental health needs of Black men. I had made this correlation between Black men having the lowest life expectancy of any population and unmanaged mental health issues and just the daily stressors of life. And so we named the company, the first iteration of the company was named Henry Health, a play on the African-American folk hero, John Henry. And so that's how the company started. And you know, it's sort of why I'm here today, even talking about mental health and wellness. And so I love sort of coming back to where we started, which is at our core, and it's in the DNA of our company, and that is serving Black men.
Serving Black men. Do you think there's anything special or unique about our psychology of Black men in general?
You know, Boris, first of all, I'll say a couple things. Number one, I'm not a trained therapist. You know, I got into mental health because I fell into depression myself and struggled to find a good therapist. And, you know, I was so broken that I started talking about how broken I was publicly. And what I realized in my brokenness is that most of my friends had been broke or were broke already and were hiding, you know, their brokenness.
Right.
And, you know, but I will tell you, I do have a hypothesis that Black men suffer from mental health in ways that we don't truly understand. Just the burden of being Black. In fact, that's what Sherman James, that's why he coined the term John Henryism. Essentially, what his research proved is that Black men exude a level of effort in everyday life that is not healthy, and that higher level of effort ultimately has an impact on their health. He particularly proved this in cardiovascular health outcomes, and therefore he coined the term John Henryism. So I do believe that there's something there, and I think for all of us, we have to ask ourselves the question: why do Black men live sicker and shorter lives than anyone else, and what can we do to change that?
Interesting. And you have recently published a series of essays on this matter in a book titled "The Joy of the Disinherited." Could you provide a description of the book and some examples of stories that sort of capture what we're dealing with as Black people?
Yeah, first of all, let me just say, even before I started working in mental health, of course, and I don't know that you even know this, maybe about 6 years ago is when it was actually the George Zimmerman verdict that sent me out asking really an intellectual question. An intellectual question was, could being a Black man make me sick? And that's when I sort of discovered like the John Henryism construct and so forth. And that came from a deep dive into the literature at that time. And what I decided then is I wanted to write a book about this because nobody was talking about the health of Black men. Certainly nobody was talking about the mental health of Black men. Like these issues, the way that we're talking about them now, we were not talking about them then. So back then I bought the domain, Boris, What's Killing Black Men, thinking that that was the title of the book I would ultimately write. When I bought that domain, of course, the global pandemic had not happened. And certainly we had no idea that we would witness the murder of George Floyd and all of the sort of racial reckoning that has come from his murder. And, you know, I started journaling last summer. And somewhere in my journaling, I realized that this is the book that I'm supposed to write. And so it's come full circle, but the book is a collection of essays. It is an exploration into my psyche, my family, and how we've sort of dealt with oppression, generational trauma, Boris, historical trauma, and how this ultimately impacts our mental health. And so, really, I think it's a powerful read. I think it further cements the need for our company at Hurdel. The need for culturally intentional teletherapy, I think, becomes very clear through this reading.
And could you just opine on that culturally relevant therapy? What is it, and what do you mean by it, and why is it a good thing to do?
Well, you know, first of all, let's take a couple steps back and talk about the history of psychology in this country. And you know, there was even a time, Boris, where the general thought was that Black people were too simple for talk therapy. And so, you know, the research and learnings that we lean on for to help us support people through mental health challenges is based on research and learning opportunities from middle-class white Americans who've experienced one single trauma. So, you know, at Hurdle, we say we face this hard truth that the mental health care system was not designed for everyone because of that. And so what we do at Hurdle is we train our therapists in an evidence-based technique that helps them develop more cultural humility and cultural responsiveness. And this is a big problem in therapy because 50% of African Americans terminate therapy prematurely because of the lack of provider fit, the lack of therapeutic alliance. That was the experience I had when I was seeking a therapist. I saw 3 therapists before I could find a therapist that I could form what I now know as a therapeutic alliance.
And when we're talking about fixing ourselves, right, or understanding what our problems are, we're trying to come to terms with the fact that we want to repair ourselves, where do we begin? I think a lot about getting more sleep, maybe dieting a little bit more, exercising, building meaningful relationships. But what other things do we have to cope with or deal with first, in your opinion?
Well, I think the good news about where we are today, Boris, is that we are having a very open conversation about mental health. And mental health is being framed as what it means to be healthy. So there's now this, I think, a general acknowledgement that health also includes good mental health. And so, a part of mental health includes some of the things of even beginning that includes some of the things you mentioned: a healthy diet, 8 hours of sleep, exercise, meaningful relationships, spending time outdoors, exercising. Those things are really important. But I think for Black men and for people from oppressed, who've been oppressed historically, or people who are from marginalized populations, I am really at a point that I think it's really important that we have deep internal reflection about who we are, the lies that we've been told about ourselves, and parse out the half truths so that we can come into a fullness of who we are. In fact, that's what I have done, and that's what I'm inviting others to do in their book. I think that this deep internal reflection about sort of, and certainly for Black men, because we're constantly sort of being fed these negative images about who we are, and society's been sort of, these messages from society, they don't stop. And if you're not careful, Boris, you will begin to believe those things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think
And we struggle with them. We have imposter syndrome. We have all types of
absolutely.
issues. And as we think about some of these half truths, do you have an example from your book on one of the half truths that you were dealing with to give people a better understanding of what you mean by half truths?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that some of these things are sort of embedded in our psyche. And that's why you have to sort of sit very quietly and unravel these things. But I grew up in the South, originally from Arkansas. My grandmother was a domestic, and she and my grandfather worked for the same family they were part of one family that owned the majority of the land in the small town that they were from. And they worked with this family for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Boris, we grew up like we didn't even go to these folks' front door, right? And so if you think about like what that puts into your psyche about your sense of belonging and where you fit in society, you sort of got to unpack that. I also have some examples in my book. For example, when my son, who at the age of 13 was accused of stealing at the local store in our neighborhood, and how that began to sort of rob him of his sort of, boyhood. And now he's taken on this persona as what people think of Black men. And
Right.
so, I think these things are sometimes very subtle, and then sometimes they're very, very direct. But I think, for a group like we're talking to today, people who want to be high performers and make a difference in their companies and in their communities, that, doing this deep work is super important. And the second part of that is sometimes when you begin to unpack these things, you may not be equipped to do them alone, which is also, one of my goals is to demystify the counseling process and to normalize it so that people can, sort of feel safe in moving forward with accessing therapy.
And this issue you're dealing with of our psyche, particularly as historically oppressed people, others have worked on it before. Do you want to talk about Jesus and the Disinherited and Howard Thurman? And I love reading up on this because I've been doing a lot of reading on it since you told me about it. And how we confront half truths and imposter syndrome, how we deal with Emmett Till situations, George, Floyd situations.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for referencing Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman wrote a book entitled Jesus and the Disinherited, which is widely considered a manual for resistance for oppressed people. In fact, his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was one of the few books that is said that Martin Luther King traveled with this book at all the time. But in his book, Thurman declares, as I do in my book, The Joy of the Disinherited, Black people, the disinherited. And I'll also, Boris, throughout the book, extend that definition to, at times, include brown people as well. And I'd even go so far to say even the disinherited would include members of the LGBTQ community. But Thurman argues that there are three core ways that you respond to oppression. Number one, you imitate the oppressor. Number two, you keep a safe distance. And then number three is outright resistance. And what I do in my essays is attempt to show how I've seen these responses play out in my family. But Thurman goes on, and this is sort of where sort of like these themes in our conversation around psyche comes up. Thurman goes on to talk about if we, the disinherited, are to like achieve our rightful place in the world, we have to perform, he calls it the delicate surgery on our psyche. Like these things, these messages we've been sent about who we are. And he says we have to perform this surgery with the precision of a surgeon, right? And you know, I will say I discovered Thurman's work after years of, you know, trying to understand my depression. You know, I went down a purely intellectual path initially. And because I am a person of faith, then I went down a sort of spiritual theological path. And then I sort of went down this sort of, I want to understand the psychology of depression. So I started studying that. And Thurman's book was really a capstone that really helped me form my ideas around, you know, what it means to be whole, what it means to be mentally healthy, and really what the pathway is to doing that.
Unbelievable. And your work continues on this, The Joy and the Disinherited, with internal reflection, helping us think through that, helping us think through how to unpack trauma. Do you have any closing comments on that for us as we're wrapping up our call today?
Well, you know, what I would just say is, you know, mental health is super important. And particularly for like the audience who we're talking to today, entrepreneurs who sort of want to build the next unicorn. In fact, you even said it, Unicorn Ambition 2021. You know, I'd be less than honest if I didn't say that on the path of trying to build something amazing, that there will be tension around, you know, taking good care of yourself and moving your company forward. In fact, I'd say if you don't feel that tension, you're probably not working hard enough in your company, right? But this ideal of mental health and like really having boundaries and a routine around how you take care and preserve your health, like that's where you sort of reach your greatness. That's how you sort of can show up in the room and be very present. I like to say, Boris, sit in your seat, like literally in your seat. The seat that I'm sitting in, I am sitting in it today, right? And that means, you know, that's a metaphor for everything else. But you can only sit in that seat if you're taking good care of yourself, if you've done the internal reflection, like it's a big part of it. And I'd encourage folks to do that work and to help others do it.
Excellent. And how could I get started with Henry Health and just exploring?
Yeah, but remember it's Hurdel, and just a little bit about the
That's
business.
right. It's now Hurdel.
We started in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We've just entered the state of Texas. We're in the state of California and Massachusetts this year. If you're in any of those states, we'd love to be able to work with you. Next year, we will enter another dozen states, right at a dozen states. So we are rapidly growing our company. This last year, we've seen an increase in treatment-seeking behavior among Black and Brown people like never before. But we want to make sure when people interact with the system, that the system really works for them. And that's why I think companies like ours are super important in this moment in time.
And where do I find your book, The Joy of the Disinherited? When does it hit bookshelves?
The Joy of the Disinherited is out. You can find it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. It's there. And Boris, I hope we can do this again.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure chatting with you and learning about mental wellness and learning about things we have to unpack. So looking forward to following up and reading your book.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too.